Afternoon, everyone. I wanted to touch base about a couple of things. First of all, I want to urge everyone who hasn't as yet participated in the conversation on the discussion page to please do that, because I would like to move on to the second discussion. I wanted to say a few words about what we're going to concentrate on over the next couple of weeks in these next couple of stories. Mostly we've been thinking about the narrator's voice, whether it is the first person, whether it is speaking for all of the characters, the omniscient voice, or partial omniscient voice, meaning the author knows the contents of some of his characters' minds, but not others. And that's an important place to start. We moved on talking about how important it is in some cases to know as much as we can about the author, especially I think in our discussion of The Very Old Man with Enormous Wings. We come to understand the fact that Marquez, though he was born in South America and in a small village very much like the one that we see in his story, and a believer, mostly Catholic, of course, but a believer in many myths and fairy tales as a child, which he came to found very endearing and used in his writing. But as Marquez left the world of the small town and joined the greater society, the literary society, the larger world of New York and Paris, and even though his heart always remained in South America, he began to become a satirist in terms of understanding how limited some of the knowledge and the stories were. So he's torn. He's torn between a world which is him. He's part of it, but he's also emerged outside of that world. And this happens to many great authors, especially those who come from southern regions for some reason. Very much the story of Tennessee Williams, the playwright, born and bred in New Orleans and St. Louis, and came to New York and was soon partying in Rome and London, and came to see the world differently, but never left the South. And he brought a certain social satire to his work as well. But I want to talk a little bit about style now and a tenor of a work. We've as I said, we've talked about the voice a lot, but now we're going to talk about the tone, the style. How do people write? How many words do they use? And why, if they don't use so many words, what's the point of that? Why not just tell us everything? We learn a lot about Emily in A Rose for Emily, for instance, and for a great purpose. We are, of course, treated to many great fairy tales and myths in The Very Old Man. And that represents a style, a more effusive style of writing. Now, as we move forward, though, we're going to encounter a much more what we would describe as a minimalist style, a choice by the writer to only tell us what is necessary, to allow our minds to figure some of these things out on their own. And this is, I think, a modernist approach to literature. It's certainly a modernist approach in the theater. As we get more and more into the 20th century, we see less and less flowery language, less and less poetry, and more realism. And we're going to encounter that after we read The Yellow Wallpaper, which is also very descriptive in many ways, although very modern and minimalist in the fact that, well, we don't get the full story. But it is certainly true, if you haven't as yet read Hills Like White Elephants, and In the Cemetery, where Al Jolson is buried, There is a style which Raymond Carver, remember when we read Raymond Carver's Cathedral? Mystified. What does all this mean? Who are these people? This is very much the case in Hills Like White Elephants. In fact, Hemingway, the author, was renowned in many ways for this style, for this very brusque, clean, and style that did not want to tell you very much. And like an audience in the theater, we want to discover things on our own. We want to be a participant. And I think that's one of the things that these authors have in mind when we encounter these stories. People don't like to be told things. They like to discover them on their own. And it's also, of course, more like life. We don't have a little narrator in our voice as we encounter the world, telling us, oh, this person was born there and lived for a while in another country, or psychologically come to understand somebody because we begin to told about their psychological world. No, we encounter in real time bits and pieces of reality. And as an observer, we pick up little bits and pieces as we go, and then we put a picture together. I don't know whether you've ever done photography or not, but if you take a picture and you are developing it in the bin, and you see slowly the picture come to life. And my father was an amateur photographer, and he used to do this. And I would gaze into this pail of water and see the picture come to life. And it took about 2 minutes. A good story is like that. And even when it comes together, you don't get the whole picture. And it introduces this term subtext. It's that information that's underneath that we create for ourselves because there are clues along the way. And that's what you're going to need to look for. And I think one of the reasons authors do this as well, if their writing style is very descriptive and effusive, not only do we not have to do any work on our own, but it doesn't allow ourselves to imagine. And we imagine, for instance, in Hills Like White Elephants, I found myself really putting together exactly what those hills by that train station looked like. The description of the train station as being 2 tracks, and inside those 2 tracks, the station. And you had to move from one side of the tracks to the other. Small clues, little bits. You could call some of them symbols, I suppose. And they are. This is a story that's full of symbols. But never are we told exactly what this relationship between this man and this woman is about. We're allowed to imagine that for ourselves. And that is much of the joy in the process of reading and in the process of doing what we're doing this summer. Learning how to not expect everything right away. To be patient, to be imaginative, and to read up not only about the author, but on what other people have to say about the author. So I hope you will all do that. And consider, for instance, in the cemetery, we're never exactly told what it is. I think we soon realize the importance of this meeting between these 2 girls. Think about how much more powerful it is when we get that story in little bits and pieces, almost as if we were visiting this friend. And it puts us in the place rather than separating us when there's a more narrative voice. So I want you to consider, as you read the next stories and do the next assignments, the importance of style, the use of words, and the tone of a piece. What is the overall modal effect of the piece. That's what we're looking for. At any rate, I hope this has been helpful as you go into the next stories. Hope you enjoy the poetry. Looking forward to your response to that. Check out the Dylan music, one of his greatest pieces ever. And I'll see you next time in Video Land, my folks.